but we also have to talk about the simple fact that African Americans, we don't want anything from white people. It's not as if we want to take something from white nationalists or take something from white supremacists. We only want what
or the
is
white working class.
Or the white working class. We're not trying to take anything. White anybody. All we really want are the things that are our inalienable rights. We don't want you to give us anything. Just basic human dignity and equity is all we're asking.
Okay. Fox News' Bill O'Reilly, no stranger to controversy, of course, and his theory on the Electoral College has outraged many people. Let's discuss now with Republican commentator Joseph Borelli, a New York City councilman, senior political commentators Kayleigh McEnany and Bakari Sellers, and Angela Rye, former executive director of the Congressional Black Caucus. Good evening to all of you. Bakari, you first. So Bill O'Reilly launched quite a firestorm. Let's listen to him describe what he says is the hidden reason behind calls to abolish the Electoral College.
The left sees white privilege in America as an oppressive force that must be done away with. Therefore, white working class voters must be marginalized. And what better way to do that than center the voting power in the cities? Very few commentators will tell you that the heart of liberalism in America today is based on race. It permeates almost every issue. That white men have set up a system of oppression. That system must be destroyed. Bernie Sanders peddled that. To some extent, Hillary Clinton did. And the liberal media tries to sell that all day long. Left wants power taken away from the white establishment. They want a profound change in the way America is run. Taking voting power away from the white precincts is the quickest way to do that.
So he mentions the liberal media, but he's not talking about CNN. So what do you think, Bakari?
I mean, if you close your eyes, you believe that you're listening to a clip from 1968 or apartheid South Africa. I mean, this is one of the few quotes when I actually saw it yesterday, when you actually listen to it in context. Context is actually worse when you get the full context of his actual quote. That's first. And second, it's ahistorical. And it's just, you know, this whole concept of white supremacy, this whole concept of this white nationalist rhetoric, I'm astounded to actually hear it out of Bill O'Reilly's mouth, a very highly rated late night TV show. And this is just not the conversation we need to be having.
Angela?
So I think that we have to have this conversation in the context of history. It's important because we continue to ignore the fact that the Electoral College itself was founded upon this same white supremacy that Bakari just referenced. James Madison, who is known as the father of the Constitution, himself a slave owner, himself pushing the idea of 3/5 of a person being a slave counted so that the master class could have authority and have voting power that was as strong as the North. That is what this is about. That is why people are frustrated. People are just now really learning about this and understanding that, hey, this electoral college system doesn't really represent us. So yes, Bill O'Reilly, you're right. White establishment to me means white supremacy. To me, it means racism. To me, it means the foundation of this country that we have to begin to understand is built upon systemic oppression. And until we're willing to address those issues, we're going to continue to have the same issues and perpetuate the same problems.
Kayleigh, you're shaking your head no.
Well, look, I don't agree with couching the Electoral College in race, either coming from Bill O'Reilly or coming from Angela Rye. I think the Electoral College is entirely separate from that. It elevates states that otherwise might not have a voice. In this case, it was working class voters out in Michigan, out in Wisconsin. But in another day, in another place, we could imagine the Electoral College empowering black voters in southern communities who have their voice heard. And because of the Electoral College, they have representation, because otherwise states that have fewer, lesser populations like Mississippi, for instance, wouldn't be represented. We have a country based on 50 republics. We don't have a direct democracy. If you have a problem with that, change it, but don't change it after an election just because you're being a sore loser and you're upset that your person didn't win. Because I didn't hear any of these arguments a week ago.
But if I may, Don, just quickly. If I may, one of the things that Kayleigh just did was ignore all the historical context that Angela put forward.
Every single bit.
The fact
because
is,
they're wrong. Because they're wrong.
That's not wrong.
No, they're not
because
wrong.
it's not wrong.
I think Angela is wrong.
Let him explain and I'll let you, go ahead, Joseph.
I think Angela's wrong for the same reason that I think Bill O'Reilly's wrong for conflating the Electoral College with the 3/5 compromise. If you look at Article 2, Section 1, that's not where the 3/5 compromise is. And if you look at Federalist Paper number 68, which Alexander Hamilton, not Madison, wrote to articulate articulate the reasons on why we have an electoral college, they're actually a lot of the same reasons the Democratic Party used to justify its support for faithless electors, including, I'm assuming maybe you guys did a couple of weeks ago when you were pushing for sort of the electors to switch their votes. So you can't conflate two things. Are there racist institutions in our country? Is the 3/5 compromise something that should be discussed in racial terms? Yeah, but I don't think it's fair to just conflate the two.
Do you understand,
So
before you respond,
but
do you understand that the part of the impetus for the Electoral College was that so people who were slave owners could count those slaves as population so that people in the North in more populous places would not have more votes than the people in the South?
None.
3/5.
The 3/5 compromise is not the same as the Electoral College, not the
But-
same
but
part of
let's-
the
but-
Constitution.
Why you don't
But-
get this.
I don't understand why you don't
no.
get it, Angela.
Because you're wrong. Like, I don't know
But yes,
what, I
you
don't
are
know
wrong.
what you're,
But
you're,
you are wrong.
Go
And
ahead,
the reason
Bakari.
that you're wrong, the reason that you're wrong is because in 1787, Wilson and Madison had this conversation. But the reason that I had a problem with Bill O'Reilly couching this conversation of white supremacy and somehow African Americans and Latinos and people of color and gay Americans and everyone who is a minority in this country attempting to somehow take away some power from the white man in this battle over the Electoral College is because it shouldn't be couched as something this small. This is a larger conversation that we have to have. It's not just a conversation about the Electoral College. You know, Donald Trump is the president of the United States. The Electoral College was based on our founders' racist ideology at that time that bred this. That's fine. But we're here now, and we do need to talk about how we're going to disband some of these remnants of white supremacy that still
But
exist.
Bakari,
I think that is the larger
6
conversation
weeks
that has
ago,
to be
no
had.
one was making this argument. I never
That's
heard this.
not
And now
true.
all of a sudden, because Hillary
But that's
Clinton
not-
lost,
but that's my
and
point.
because the
That's my-
Electoral
but that's-
College put Donald Trump there,
but
now all
that's
of a sudden
my-
we've got
that's
to
my
get rid of
entire
it.
point.
Look, but Bakari, you
That's my-
mentioned
that's my entire
1968.
point.
In
Hold on,
1968
Joseph. Go ahead, Bakari.
But that's my entire point, Kaylee. I do not want to reduce this conversation to one about the Electoral College. I think this is a larger conversation that has to be had. What he said yesterday, or whenever Bill O'Reilly said it, it was so flawed. We can talk about how it was ahistorical, as Angela so eloquently pointed out, but we also have to talk about the simple fact that African Americans, we don't want anything from white people. It's not as if we want to take something from white nationalists or take something from white supremacists. We only want what
the
is
white
bestowed
working
upon us.
class?
Or the white working class. We're
Or
not
white
trying
anybody.
to take anything. White anybody. All we really want are the things that are our inalienable rights. We don't want you to give us anything. Just basic human dignity and equity is all we're asking.
Go ahead,
and,
Joseph.
and let,
Well,
and let
Bakari
Hang on,
mentioned,
Angela.
Bakari mentioned 1968, and in that year, both the Democrats and Republicans saw an advantage in advocating for the Electoral College to be removed. And since that time, both parties have, you know, when it was convenient to them, advocated for the Electoral College to be removed. I think Bill O'Reilly's mistake, and you're correct in this, was to make this a racial argument. There are valid arguments, and there's a valid conversation to be had on whether the Electoral College should exist as it does under the 12th Amendment, or should be changed. And I think O'Reilly, to just sort of insert this as a racial argument, is where his mistake really was made.
But that's not his mistake at all. The mistake is for us to continue to act like this is not a country that was built on the oppression of black and brown and Native American people. We cannot continue to look past that. I have always talked about the troubles of the Electoral College. Kaylee, I know that we're just meeting each other this year and becoming friendly this year, but that is also errant. You're wrong. I don't care what the Democratic Party has done or what the Republican Party has done. We have to address the fact that systemic oppression and racism is real in this country. Bill O'Reilly had it right. There is, I almost said white, he had it that way too, but there is a problem with the white establishment. That white establishment is called white supremacy. That white supremacy is called racism. That racism is called systemic oppression, and it is time for us to call it what it is. That is rooted. The Electoral College is rooted in that system, and we cannot separate 3/5 human, the fact that my ancestors were counted as 3/5 as a part of that Electoral College structure.
Angela,
we just can't
no
do
one
it.
is condoning white supremacy. That's a horrific ideology. There's no place for it in this country.
Except for Bill O'Reilly.
It's a very small portion of society that sadly exists that's there. But
bigger than you know.
It is being given a megaphone because people on the left are trying to tie the Trump administration in every way, shape, and form to something that doesn't exist. And these white supremacists are being given a megaphone, not by Donald Trump, but by the left, who continually elevates them to be something more significant than they are.
Kaylee, you can't put that at the feet of Democrats. You have to put that at the feet of your candidate. There are people who are getting booed off of airplanes, flicked off.
Which was a hoax,
county.
we found out.
I don't. That's
That
false.
was a
That's
YouTube
false.
star who
That's false.
makes
That's false.
films about being offensive on planes.
You can make that allegation about him if you want to, but here's the fact of the matter: there was a white man on a Delta flight who acted an absolute ass and did something very similar. You have kids chanting "Build that wall." You have a rise in hate
Trump
incidents.
supporters getting beat up.
You
Yes.
have a rise in hate incidents since your candidate was elected. You cannot put that at the feet of the left. I would also implore you all to understand that racism is a bipartisan and nonpartisan problem. I've said that 100 times and I mean it.
Stand by. We'll be right back. We'll be right back.
Okay.
All right, so back now with my panel, and I want to bring Bakari. I think you wanted to say something, but as you know, discussing this here with Joseph Borelli, he's saying that it's a mathematical problem, not a racial problem, when it comes to the Electoral College and who gets counted and, you know, as citizens and who gets to be president.
Well, I mean, I appreciate having a historical conversation with my friend Joe, but I think that, and one of the things that I wanted to look at when Bill O'Reilly said it, is I don't want to look at this in the context of just the Electoral College. It has to be looked at in a larger system and in the larger society we live in. And Kaylee was talking about the very small remnants that we have of white supremacy or white nationalism or racism in this country. And I think the problem that we're having is we're talking past each other, because many people look for signs that may say coloreds only or segregated water fountains or segregated schools just to think that racism, that was the only time that racism exists, when that's not the case. I mean, you can look at the Quarter of Shame in South Carolina or schools where African American kids go to school where their heating and air don't work and their infrastructure is falling apart. Or you can look at Flint, Michigan, for example. Flint doesn't happen in Orange County. I mean, you can look at these systems of oppression we have in this country, and although it may not say whites only, that is still the remnants of what this country has to grapple with, which is that element of racism, which is that element of supremacy. And that's what I think I'm trying to get Kaylee and Joe to understand.
I understand that, Bakari, and I think you're totally right. Look, I mean, I've heard stories from my criminal law professor, for instance, saying that he stood on the side of the road, an African-American male, trying to get a cab, and he watched cab after cab go to the white person standing in front of them, and no one would stop for him. It's a microaggression, if you will, is what some people like to call it.
That's not a system. That's an implicit bias. That's not a system. That's an implicit bias.
Racism exists. No one is denying that, and it's horrific, and we should dispel of that myth. But likewise, we shouldn't haphazardly call people racist. Everyone affiliated with Donald Trump in some way, shape, or form has been labeled a racist, including myself, including Joe, and it's unfair, and we should stand together and try to talk to each other instead of talking past each other, and that means resisting labels.
Kaylee, let me ask you something. Have I ever called you a racist?
You haven't, but many other people have, and everybody who has any sort of affiliation with Donald Trump has. Go look at Twitter, yes, please.
Look at my Twitter, too.
I know.
But my point is just this. If we could stay within the confines of this conversation, I think that's very important, because we have the opportunity to have at least a civil discourse on this when there are a lot of other folks who haven't gotten to that point. And I'm just asking for a simple acknowledgement that there are systems in this country that are in place and they have racist roots. And if you have a bad foundation, Kaylee, like, let's go to church on this. If you have a bad foundation, the fruits of that thing are bad. They're negative. So that means we have to question the system and figure out how to either remedy the system, amend the system, or get rid of that.
Here's the flaw in your argument. By your logic of your argument, we should destroy the Constitution, get rid of democracy as we have it, and rebuild from the ground up, because it's all rooted in bad.
No one's saying that.
But no one's saying argument.
But no one's saying that.
You're failing to recognize the real reason we have the Electoral College, so that states like California and New York don't decide our president at the expense of states like Iowa.
California was not around when we invented the Electoral College.
Time out.
No,
California was not around when we invented the Electoral College.
You're missing my point, Bakari. Let me be very clear. My point is this. New York and California are the reason that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. Without them, Donald Trump won by 3 million votes. The reason we have the Electoral College is that states like Iowa and states like Michigan are represented, and not just the
What's wrong with New York and California?
There's nothing wrong with that. But my point is, you're missing my point. It has nothing to do whether California existed or not. That proves you're not listening to my point. My point is, if we didn't have the have the Electoral College, states like New York and California would choose our president. So states like Iowa,
what's wrong with the population? I'm just posing a question.
And I'm giving
what's wrong with the population deciding
the farming states, like the farming states, like Iowa, like the Rust Belt states, would be ignored. Their interests would be ignored, and the interest of only those in urban areas like New York, like California, would be represented, and we would have a whole slew of people, a whole slew of industries who wouldn't be represented by the president of the United States.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that, and that's why I think Bill O'Reilly's point is wrong, because he brought unnecessarily this racial component into it. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying the Democratic Party feels that they would have more power if the Electoral College was abandoned and they could rely on the principal urban areas of our country. I think O'Reilly's premise is even wrong, because if you look at the major cities, he referenced New York in his little rant, but if you look at New York, Chicago, and L.A., white males are still the most largely populated ethnic and gender group in those cities. So I don't think it's in his mind it's an automatic usurpation of white people's votes or anything. I think that's where he went wrong.
Here's
But
the
the
challenge.
problem.
Wait, Bakari, hold on one second. Here's the challenge.
Go.
You all also are assuming that the entire state of California and the entire state of New York are urban areas. That is factually
I think
inaccurate.
he just said that. He just said that.
No,
I
but
didn't hear you say that.
No,
So
I said that they would focus on urban areas, the metropolitan area, because that's what Bill O'Reilly actually, that's what he referenced.
So then we didn't say the same thing.
But we're missing.
Yeah,
But we're missing Bill O'Reilly's ignorance. We're missing Bill O'Reilly's ignorance here when you just. But that's my point. And I mean, in Kaylee's argument, I mean, you could take away Texas and then you have a whole nother argument. But that's neither here nor there. What Bill O'Reilly was talking about was somehow that the Democratic Party, that liberals, that voters of color, that people of color, somehow want to take things away from the white establishment. Listen to how that sounds. I mean, if you go back and you listen to some of the tapes in South Africa, and you listen to the apartheid type language that was used then. I mean, when you have this gaslighting that Bill O'Reilly was doing, I mean, we talked about how it was ahistorical, but we need to refocus on how dangerous his rhetoric was.
It sounds like Make America Great Again. It sounds like let's take our country
But you know what? But you know what it talks about, though? To be completely honest, it talks about a group of people in this country who fear that they're losing some power or losing something.
Absolutely.
More to discuss. And I'm sure Bill O'Reilly would like this. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
And good night to
Happy
California
Hanukkah, and Happy Kwanzaa,
and New York and
all those
Iowa
urban
and
and
all
rural
those places in
areas.
between. Thank you. I appreciate it. That's it for us tonight. Thanks for watching. I'll see you right back here tomorrow.